So I thought today we'd talk about half square triangles. We've talked about a number of other methodologies and the components of quilts. And half square triangles are one of those major components that you can use. And the scrappy quilt that I was looking at, I don't know if you can see it this way. Yeah, here's there. It's all half square triangles, darks and lights mixed together in a way that all those dark colors could be all kinds of scraps and the light could be all kinds of scraps for all that. This is from a book called Scrap Quilts. I was trying to figure out some way to use up some of the things in my stash. But half square triangles are interesting components of many different designs. Here's another one. This is Pinwheels. And again, half square triangles that are done. So you take a square and you draw a diagonal line, and then you mix the colors. So to make a half square triangle, you take a square and you cut it in half diagonally, and you wind up with these little triangles. And the tricky part about half square triangles is that once you've cut these pieces, the bias edge, the part that is the diagonal, is stretchy. And you can see I can stretch that. I stretched that at least ½ an inch, and that's only 4 inches long. So this side, if I take this with the grain of fabric, I pull it and it doesn't stretch very much at all. But if I pull this bias edge, the diagonal, it'll stretch quite a lot. So as you handle a little triangle like this, you have to try to make sure that you're not going to stretch it. So I'm going to take two pieces and put them right sides together. And I have to line them up exactly so that they will match. I'm going to put a couple pins in it. Got these edges together. And now I'm going to carefully not stretch it, but sew a 1/4 inch seam. I've got it off camera, sorry. So here you can see on that edge, I'm not seeing any pink. And on this edge, I'm not seeing any white. Okay, they're matched exactly the right way. I've got a couple of pins to hold them that way. And I'm just going to sew that edge. And as I'm sewing, I'm guiding the fabric, but I'm not pulling it. So again, I'm trying not to stretch it. So now I've got that 1/4 inch seam, and I can take my pins out and I would press that baby. So now it looks like this. Okay. That's
you don't want to press your seams open?
I usually don't, and I press toward the dark side so that you don't have the shadow underneath the light side.
Okay. So and what size squares did you start off with? Did you start off with 6 inches or?
No, what I want this square to be is 3.5.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what you do is when you're making half square triangles, you want to, they tell you to make it 7/8 of an inch bigger than you want the finished square to be. So if it's 3.5, it's going to be
4 1/4.
4 3/8.
4 3/8. Okay.
Right. I don't measure well in eighths, so I tend to round it up.
Everyone does.
Okay, so I would measure, if I wanted to be 3.5, I'll cut it 4.5.
Okay.
And then you slice it diagonally, put it together, you lose your ½ inch, right? Because of that. And it's always weird trying to get those to be exactly accurate. But then in order to make sure that it's really the right size, you trim it. So you take a little ruler like this, and I want it to be 3.5. So I'm going to make it 3.5. 1, 2, 3.5. And then trim it. But the trick to trimming one of these things is to make sure that you've got the diagonal exactly centered. So there is a diagonal line across here that I can put right on the seam that I just made and trim it to size like that. So you don't want to trim it so that the diagonal line isn't right in the middle. You want it to be just in the right place. So that's why you want that diagonal line to help guide you. And you want it to be 3.5. Okay. And then when I want the diagonal line to go in the other direction, I just turn the ruler over and make it 3.5. Just line it up there. So now it's a perfect 3.5. And I can put those together. So here's one possibility for how you can put them together. Where's my other guy? There he is. So the pattern that I showed you before, you make blocks that look like this. The block is going to look like this. I'm going to have 4 of them together, 2 pointing with the dark to the middle and 2 pointing with the light to the middle. It comes out like that. And then when I put them together, it'll be all over. Good morning, Jewel. So that's one way to make them. That's the old-fashioned way, and it's certainly fun. There's nothing wrong with doing them like that. But because of that stretchiness of the middle line, there's another method that I prefer. You take one of these sandwiches, you draw a diagonal line, and then you stitch 1/4 inch from the 2 sides of that diagonal line. And notice, because I haven't cut anything, I don't have that stretchiness to deal with. So it tends to stay more square. So here, I'll show you from the beginning. You take 2 pieces, you put them with the right sides together, and I put 2 pins in it. Just to hold the 2 things on top of one another correctly. So my 2 pins are opposite one another. And then I'm going to take one of my straight edges. All I want is a straight edge here. And I'm going to draw a diagonal line where I'm eventually going to cut it. But for now, I'm not cutting it. So there, I just drew a diagonal line and I made it nice and dark. You can really use any pen because you're going to cut on that line. Just make sure that it's permanent. It's a permanent marker, not a water-soluble marker, as the water-solubles sometimes will run. But if it's a permanent marker, that's going to be our cut line, so it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line.
Hmm.
So there's one seam. I'm going to turn it upside down and do the other side. Okay, so now I've got two lines, one on either side of that marked line. And now I'm going to cut it. I'm just going to cut on that black line that I made before. And now I have two.
Mm.
Okay. And take up my pins and open it up, and I have a patch. All right. And then I would press that. If you want to open the seams, you can. I think, as we've said before, it actually makes your quilt stronger if you don't. Because then when you quilt on top of that, that's a really strong seam. If you open it up, then the only thing between those two patches is a piece of thread.
Mm-hmm.
This way you've got the fabric together and you're quilting on top of it. Okay. So that's your half square triangle. So you're going to start with a square. And the way you make your square is you can cut strips like I've done here. And then you cut it in half. So each time you make a cut like this, I'm just going to move that on the floor. Each time you make a cut, you use your ruler and you're going to set it. This ruler is 6 inches wide. I'm going to make a 4.5 inch cut. And I'm lining up one of the dark lines on this ruler, both the bottom and the left edge. And then I cut on the right edge. And now I have it exactly the right size. And just make another one. Right sides together. This one fabric, sometimes it's a little hard to tell which is the front and which is the back. So I just say, which one is darker, A or B?
Mm.
That tells me which end is the right one. Put that together. 2 pins. Draw my line and stitch. So this is my favorite way to do it. There are all kinds of, and I can send you a handout that I have from a magazine that I get that has a number of different ways that you can make these. And you can do 4 at a time, different things like that, with a method that's very similar to what I'm doing now.
I think that's a real nifty trick, the doing it on both sides and then cutting it down the middle. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're quick and they're much more reliably square because you're dealing with that bias edge. But it's useful to try it both ways so that you can see the difference. Your own self,
appreciation. Yeah.
Have your own habits about the way that you put things through the sewing machine too. And the main thing to remember is your job is only to guide. The sewing machine that is drawing the material in with the presser foot. So you don't need to push it. You just need, and you don't need to pull it. You just need to guide it.
a good life lesson.
All right, so there I have two. Taking out my pins. And I have these, and they still need to be trimmed. But so I think it's fun, and then you can play with those as components in your design. Oh, here's a bear claw. This is the bear claw I was telling you.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Oh,
has
neat.
a square, and then the claws are half square triangles. So you see what I mean about just organizing those little patches together in different designs.
Yeah.
Manner of different combinations.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.